Proverbs 23. I'm supposed to ask you for help, some of you to help out with setting up the tables back there in the back for Sunday morning. There is a layout that we have to have with that, so they'll grab the card that shows you the picture of how the tables and chairs are to go, but that's for the Mother's Day breakfast on Sunday morning. So if you could help with that right after service, I'll jump in. It won't take any time at all. All right, Proverbs 23, titled the message, More Thoughts from Proverbs 23. There you go. See, that's easy. All right, chapter 23, and let's go down to verse 13. Chapter 23 and verse 13. Withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. He'll sound like it, but he won't. That's why he tells you that, right? Thou shalt beat him with the rod, and shalt deliver his soul from hell. My son, if thine heart be wise, my heart shall rejoice, even mine. Yea, my reins shall rejoice when thy lips speak right things. Let not thine heart envy sinners, but be thou in the fear of the Lord all the day long. For surely there is an end, and thine expectation shall not be cut off. Hear thou, my son, and be wise, and guide thine heart in the way. Be not among winebibbers, among riotous eaters of flesh, for the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. Hearken unto thy father that begot thee, and despise not thy mother when she is old. Buy the truth, and sell it not. Also wisdom, instruction, and understanding. The father of the righteous shall greatly rejoice, and he that begetteth a wise child shall have joy of him. Thy father and thy mother shall be glad, and she that bare thee shall rejoice. My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. For a whore is a deep ditch, and a strange woman is a narrow pit. She also lieth in wait as for a prey, and increaseth the transgressors among men. Who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who hath babbling? Who hath wounds without cause? Who hath redness of eyes? They that tarry long at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine. Look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. At the last it biteth like a serpent, and stingeth like an adder. Thine eyes shall behold strange women, and thine heart shall utter perverse things. Yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, or as he that lieth upon the top of a mast. They have stricken me, shalt thou say, and I was not sick. They have beaten me, and I felt it not. When shall I awake? I will seek it yet again. Again, so much in Proverbs. We've covered quite a bit already just several weeks ago, verses 29 to the end of the chapter, talking about alcohol, the drinking of wine, and we covered that in another passage, so we won't cover that tonight. I will take note of verse 26 before we get into our lesson. My son, give me thine heart. In Malachi, he says there that the two prophets, being Moses and Elijah, when they come back, Elijah, he said that his preaching is going to take the hearts of the fathers and draw it back to the children, and the hearts of the children back to the fathers. And you get in the passage like this, he says, son, give me thine heart. And I'm about convinced that when they're born, when they first show up, you've got their heart. You've got their heart. They just love mom and daddy, and they love a daddy. But it's our actions, fathers. It's our choices that we make, and that's how we lose it. And so at this point, he's telling his son, and that's what Solomon's doing. He's giving this wisdom. And in this latter part of Proverbs 23, you just kind of get this sense that he's reminiscing a little bit about some old times, maybe thinking back of the way things used to be, reminding him of certain comments he's already made in regards to his child. You look at verse 23, buy the truth and sell it not. There's a place over in Isaiah that he says it's for sale, but then he says it's for sale, but you can't use money to buy it. How do you buy it, but you can't use money? Well, somebody had to make a cost for it. In other words, somebody had to make a sacrifice, but you can't physically buy wisdom, and you can't buy truth. But it'll cost you something. It might cost you friends, it might cost you family, it might cost you the world, but it'll cost something. I want to back up to verse 13. And in verse 13, withhold not correction from the child. So obviously some do. Some pull back and they don't correct the children. He said, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. Now the Bible is not here saying what we would call in society abuse of children. And some folks can take that which is Bible, no matter the subject, and run it into either ditch on either side. It doesn't matter the subject. You get somebody with alcohol and the subject of wine, and they'll use it to justify their wrong, right? You need to get some that'll run it to the other ditch. You understand that wine or alcohol does have a purpose. If you're dying, we can give it to you, so that it kind of numbs some things and you don't get to enjoy all the pain that you were getting ready to have. And that's a Bible statement that's given. One time, the Apostle Paul says, hey, Timothy, he said, take a little wine for thy stomach's sake. Well, it wasn't because he needed to drown away problems. He was having stomach issues. And he recommended him that medicinally. And so you'll find that medicinally, there's alcohol used all the time. And highest sales of NyQuil's in Utah. Did you know that? You start putting the puzzle pieces together. Them good old Mormons out there, they don't drink, do they? Well, they might. They might. Just a different form. So you can take any subject and you could push it too far. Somebody could say, well, I'm not going to correct my children at all. I'm going to be nice to them, be kind to them, and just tell them that you've hurt mama's feelings. And he says, okay. He says, you withhold not correction, you got a problem. And obviously, we know that some take it to the extreme, and it becomes child abuse. The Bible does not endorse that at all. That's not what he's referring to. We'll talk a little bit more about it. But verse 13, withhold not correction from the child. I do know this, that children are referred to in the Bible as a plant. It's kind of an analogy. And I do not have a green thumb. I just humor myself. That's all I do. And I have fun planting some things, and you go to these garden centers, and those things are like temptations. And like I really think that I could grow that. I can't grow it, but it'd be a nice idea. And I'm a sucker every year, and we go, oh, let's buy one, and we kill it. We're just good at it. Back about, I guess, around 2010, it might have been, not 2009, I don't remember exact dates, we'd gotten some muscadine vines. Okay, the neighbor went, oh, you're going to make wine. No, we're not making wine. It's just something fun to grow and have these grapes with it. And so I got 3 of them with the intention of getting a 4th one. I never got a 4th one. It's still waiting for the one spot for it to go in there. And I put in these posts, and I put the cables in all the cranking system, and so I had 2 in one area, and they're in front to the west side of the garden, and then to the west of that one is another one running parallel. Well, several years down the road, around 10 years later or so, the cable broke. I have all good intentions. I've got the replacement cable still in my garage. You ever had projects like that? I'm going to get to it one day. And in the meantime, there's that one plant, that one muscadine, that it has no cable to grow upon, like a trellis, right? But I've got a T-post right there. And of course, they curve anyway, right? They're vine. It's curving around it. Well, then it just kind of just goes, T-post is still standing, and then it's laying like this. I walked out the other day and looked at it and went, yeah, I'm going to get to that cable. I still haven't done it. You say, you're going to do it? No, I'm not going to do it. It's still growing. But I know this, if I were to take that and force it back up, it's not going to grow straight. It was allowed for the last 5 or 6 years to grow like this. It's the smallest plant in comparison to the other two. The other two actually have, there's a red oak to the south of that pole, and the vines have traveled that trellis and made its way up into that tree because it had something to grow on. I understand it's not really a tree and it's not going to grow straight. I get that. But the analogy I'm making to you is that it left to itself, left alone, laying on the ground, there's not much I'm going to be able to do with it. Maybe I could cut it all the way back, but then I have a risk of disease or pest getting into it and killing the whole thing. You take a child and it's like a precious plant. If you do nothing with it, meaning correction and guidance, then you're running the risk that one day when you decide, I'm going to make it straight now, no, you're not. No, you're not. You could force it. And you might lose the very thing you're trying to keep. He says in verse 13, withhold not correction from the child, for thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. And again, and I'm not even going to get on the subject because I'm not endorsing child abuse. I'll actually give you the instruction that God gives in regards to correction. For example, if the child doesn't understand what they're being disciplined for, then what are you trying to accomplish? Does God discipline you for things in life that you've done wrong? And when you say, God, what did I do? And He goes, I'm not telling you. You'd say He's a mean God. God's not going to chastise you if you don't understand what's going on. So the child needs to understand, and why? Because they need to reconsider their actions. In one other place in Ephesians, he said to the father, he said, don't let it be done in anger. And, when it comes to that branch again, it doesn't have to be a large branch. It doesn't have to be a large tree. It can stay real small and real skinny, and it's still real flexible. And you can begin to mold and to direct where it needs to go. That's the idea of the correction. I wonder if that's why he said use a rod. He never said to use a baseball bat, or he never said to use a 2x4 or a timber. He didn't describe it that way. When you think of that rod, it's the idea that something's skinny and flexible. I'm going to give you something practical, Mom and Dad, especially with the little ones. Swat it on your leg first before you use it on them. You'll know how it stings. Hurts too much, it might calm you down a little bit. God gave you hands to mold and make things, and it's an element of who you are as a person. He gave you an inanimate object, and He said use a rod. Because these are to be associated with someone that loves them. Are you getting my picture here? God never said use a hand. He said use a rod. So that hand should be that of love, the hand of God. The rod of correction, it's often referred to, a picture of authority. Look at Job chapter 5. Job chapter 5. Job 5. Now, please don't tune me out here this evening. Some of those that are sitting here and you're saying, I'm glad I don't have little ones anymore, or that's not your space of life. Because we're going to kind of transition into some things in regards to God, and we're going to talk about how God corrects and the role with it. And it'll actually bleed over into Sunday morning message for Mother's Day. I'm not dealing with correction, but you'll see how it kind of flows into that subject matter. But Job chapter 5, in verse 17, Job 5:17. Behold, happy is the man whom God correcteth. So God corrects, see. This is why we say that when you correct children in righteousness, in the right manner, doing what's right, that you are a representation of how God will deal with a Christian down the road. You're presenting the picture that God is an authority in your life. And even though you can grow old and say, I'll never have a boss over me, and you become your own company, let's say, God's still in charge. And if you're His child, He'll correct. He said, therefore despise not thou the chastening of the Almighty. Don't despise Him. Look at Proverbs chapter 3. Proverbs 3. Proverbs chapter 3. We've dealt with this before. Proverbs chapter 3. So this correction in the Bible towards children is a picture of the correction of God towards any child, no matter the age, no matter how old you are. If you're a child of God, you're born again, He is your Father, and He has all right and all jurisdiction and all authority to correct you when you do wrong. Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 12, for whom the Lord, and what's that next word? Loveth. Everybody, not just the children, all that are saved, don't ever forget that when God does correct you, it shows you that He loves you. He's showing you His love. Because you don't love your kids the same way that you might say that I love them next door neighbor kids. You might like the kids next door, but you don't correct them, you don't have the same interest in them, you don't have the same desires and goals with your children as you do the next door neighbor or vice versa. You might care about them. You may not want them to get hit in the road by a car driving by. But you will correct your children because what do you see some things in them that look just like you. And that's what aggravates you. Yeah, that's usually what aggravates us. They're the same personality. You ever as a parent, had God go, "You're acting the same way"? The Holy Spirit has a way of saying that. Now I know every kid thinks, "Yeah, right." They don't. Yeah, there's a thought that crosses through, and we say, "You're being selfish," and God goes, "You too." And God corrects His children. There's numerous verses with this, and obviously verse 12, even as a father, the son in whom He delighteth. So when you correct your children, there should be a desire to put this child's life and in the right course, in the right path. Familiar passage, chapter 22 of Proverbs. And in chapter 22, in verse 6, you all know the verse, train up a child in the way you should go. And those as famous as it is probably one of the most misunderstood verses in all the Bible. Because it says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. But again, it's proverbial wisdom. Some do depart from it. If you neglect or you choose not to correct in a Bible method, that's any subject matter. If you decide you're going to do anything opposite of God, and God clearly lays out the instruction, whether it's child rearing, whether it is marriage, financial, whatever it is, if you say, I'm going to try it a different way, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. God's book is the authority. So why all of a sudden have we gotten among Christianity that we're afraid to talk about this subject when the Bible is very clear of how to raise our children? You understand that even this message over live stream puts me in a position, in a place that if it gets a hold of the world goes, how dare him say that? Even in the subject of ladies to submit to your husbands, the world goes, oh, how terrible. Well, just try their method and see what you produce. It's not going to work. And here's what it is when it comes to raising our children. You ought to have a love for that child. And you ought to have a desire to see them do what is right. And for some of you, it's not to make the same mistakes that you made. And to go in a path that will protect them and guard them through the rest of their days. The writer of Hebrews in chapter 13, you don't have to turn there, but in chapter 13, he grabs a hold of Proverbs chapter 3, which we just read in verse 12. And he said, whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth. And he grabs hold of what is in Proverbs as in regards to a parent and a child. He grabs hold of that in Hebrews, and he says, that is God the Father with you, his child. And then he makes an amazing statement. He said, we had earthly fathers that chastise us basically of their own will. And every parent, as much as we don't want to admit it, we have to be honest and say, there's been times where we disciplined or we made a judgment call of some type of correction, and we were wrong. Come to find out, they didn't do it, or the other kid blamed it for it and didn't fess up. And they took the punishment. Or you were angry and made a judgment call that wasn't right. We've all been there. And so Hebrews says, we've all been like that. He said, we've made the mistakes. And then he says, but not your heavenly Father. And he says that your heavenly Father, when he chastises, it brings forth a peaceable righteousness. And I've seen that with the boys through the years, especially when they're little, and you bring up about a correction, and it's almost like that's what they wanted within their own soul. They wanted something to put some guardrails up. They wanted you to finally say, no. And you brought correction, and there was peace. And if you've ever been a parent like that, and then you think, why didn't I do that sooner? Why did I keep putting that off and didn't want to deal with it right away? There's all sorts of reasons. But he says it produces something that's peaceable. And even though God can step into your life as a child of his, and he brings discipline, it should be a comfort to you to know that God loves you so much, he'd stop you right in your tracks and say, what you're doing is wrong. And the punishment, the correction from God may hurt. It may not feel good, but you know that He did it for the best. And it's usually those very instances that we grab hold and say, Romans 8:28, for all things work together for good. And you recognize at some point that it is for good. Look at Proverbs 29, Proverbs chapter 29. So realistically, if we choose not to correct, we choose not to bring about that which is right, and we neglect it, it's not going to produce righteousness. And it's not going to produce peace. It's just going to keep the home in turmoil. Proverbs 29, verse 15. The rod and reproof. Notice they're different. See that? So the rod is not the reproof. The reproof is, let me explain to you. And here's what you got to do. God speaks to you at your level. Aren't you glad that God doesn't use all them big words that are in that book to try to explain to you what you did wrong and you go, huh? You ever heard somebody that used a lot of big words and you went, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. God will come down to your level. So if it's a toddler, get on their level. I mean this with all respect. I'm not saying being disrespectful here, but don't use the big words to explain it. Well, the theological reason that God says, no, what you did was wrong. And at some point you've got to explain, this is sin. Do you understand what sin is? And they say, no. Well, this is what sin is. And you explain that. You bring it to their level. Now, I can't take my 18-year-old and say, do you know what sin is? You did wrong. Right? That's not his level. So we now discuss things at a higher level, right? Yeah. So God says there's the rod and there's reproof, and He said they both give what? Wisdom. The reproof yields over wisdom of saying, well, this is what you did and this is what's wrong with it. The rod goes, I don't want to do that again. See the wisdom that comes from that one? There's a nerve. I don't know if they've ever named it, but that nerve goes from the rear to the brain. And that thing is like as fast as lightning. It is. And it goes, that hurts. And then tears come. And things go, ow! You know. And then there's a nerve that goes in response to that with the hands that want to go behind. And then I say, I wouldn't do that for you. You need to be careful. You see, why are you saying this stuff? Because there's some folks that have no idea how all this works. Because some of them got raised by Dr. Spock out there. Some of them had timeout chairs. Some of them realized that mom and dad could count to 25. Did you notice that God didn't say count to 20 with them? You understand that? It's not what He said. He said the rod and the reproof, they give wisdom, verse 15. But a child left himself bringeth his mother to shame. Well, it might not happen right away. But it'll happen. It'll happen. And by the time you're ready to make action, when you should have taken care of it when they were little, now when they're 22 and 25, I think one of the best analogies is you planted a plant that was precious. And you let it grow along with weeds. And 5 years down the road, 20 years down the road, oh yeah, go ahead and just pull that weed and tell me what happens to that plant. If you ever tried gardening and you thought, I don't want to pick weeds right now, and let the weeds keep growing. And then eventually go out there and grab that weed and you yank on that thing and it pulls up a root ball about that big on that weed. And guess what came with it? That pretty little flower you planted. You say, what do I do? But all you can do is just take a pair of scissors and cut the weed back. And you know what it's doing the whole time? It's just sucking the nutrients from keeping that plant to grow. God says, take care of it when they're little. You say, why? You got a hard enough time keeping their heart. You got a hard enough time already keeping their heart. Why do you want to go and try your route and get down the road of life and realize, I set this in a course of action I didn't need to go. Because it says he'll bring his mother to shame. Look at chapter 22. Chapter 22. Chapter 22, verse 15. 22:15. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. They're just born silly. They are. They just got foolishness with them. That's boys and girls. But the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. Well, what is the correction? The correction is putting a path. What if you asked yourself as a parent, am I giving my children the proper and the right training? What if you asked yourself, am I raising them, as Ephesians says, in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord? What if you asked yourself, am I pointing them in the right direction? What if you asked yourself, am I personally sparing and holding back the rod of correction and not giving it when it's needed? What if you asked yourself the question, am I equipping them for future problems and situations of life and how to deal with it? So here's some practical things I wrote down. Present to those children Jesus Christ early in their life. Early. I'm not saying this because none of you are not doing this. You're in church on a Wednesday night. These are the subjects that came about. Bear with me, though, because, again, I'm dealing with a group of folks that are going, I'm glad mine are grown. But there's still a weight of responsibility upon you as well. Pray for them. Take them to church. Set a right example. Talk to them on their level. Instruct and give lessons of righteousness. If we're not careful, we become preachers, where all we do is just preach at them. You know what God does with you? Sometimes He'll say, hey, you see that sheep over there? It's like you. What do you mean, God? He said, the Lord's my shepherd. And He starts giving you a psalm. And He says, people are like sheep. Sheep in my pasture. He'll say, see them lost folks? They're like goats. Yeah. He said, you see the devil? He's like a serpent. He said, you see that wine? It's like a serpent. It'll bite you. God starts giving you illustrations, and why can't we do that in life? Isn't that kind of what a preacher can do, is grab a hold of something practical? That's what he should be able to do in certain illustrations and say, illustrate to you something that God can do in your life, or maybe what He's doing in your life. And so what if we learned how to do that, instruct and use lessons, not to preach at them, but to say, this is what happens. I think I told you that a few weeks ago. We went through that estate sale. And pulling out of that driveway, I told the boys, I said, there's nothing in that house that resembled Christianity. You wouldn't have walked through all that man's stuff. I have no idea who he was. I could dig around, find a name. I do know that they called him, his nickname was Bingo. I'm not sure that was about the dog, okay? Because I saw a lot of stuff about casinos in there. Saw a lot of signs of immorality. And we just started naming some of the things that we saw. I told you that already. I told him, if we're all dead and gone, and a day's going to come, somebody ought to be able to walk in our house that didn't know us and say, I think they're Christians. I think they were. I mean, there are Bibles everywhere. There's books about the Bible. There's a bunch of missionary stories. There's some Bible verses hanging up. Their music was left playing. I looked through their movies, looked through their channels on their YouTube. They're pretty clean. Is that what we said about you? I put it this way, we didn't say that about that man when we walked away. You ought to be able to take just simple things like that of life and say, hey, people watch you. Listen to them. We're all bad about that. Especially as a parent, we want to just instruct them. You know what they want from us? Would you just listen to me? How about love on them? I've never understood this. I've never understood. And individuals have said in statements of saying, my mom, my dad never told me that they loved me. I don't get that. I wasn't raised that way. That was not in our household. Mom and dad, and I've told you this before, dad looks real tough. He's just a big teddy bear. That's all he is. And man, just saying that right there, you get a little clump, and you start getting a little teary-eyed. And I can get emotionally going. I can do that. But you know what I heard from him? Still do. I love you. You know what I tell him? I love you. There is no shame at all for my teenage boys to walk up to me amongst the whole church and stand there and give me a hug and give me a kiss. Ain't nothing wrong with that. I love them. They love me. Some show different aspects of it, but you know what? There is no substitute. There is no substitute for love. There is none. Get involved in a family household. Our whole society wants to divide. It does. It's everything around us. It wants to divide us. Get involved. Make them do chores. Make them do chores. Our boys love chores. They love them. They love them so much that they love hearing their mom remind them that they have chores every day of their life. It's a joy to them. Evidently, it just brings comfort to know that mom has not forgotten them, and they have chores, and they have duties. We've gone some places before, and the boys will get home and go, Daddy, that place was nasty. I'm like, thank you. Thank you. You can see it. This is why. This is why we clean the kitchen. This is why we vacuum the house. This is why. And you know what they say? They see something, and they say, I'm glad we don't live like that. Hey, Mom, I know that you can do it better than them. They don't vacuum as good. They don't wash the dishes as good as you do. But how are they going to learn? They need to learn that there's responsibilities within the household. It is not, you're doing a disservice if you do all the work. You're raising a brat. You heard me say it. I'll smile. Yeah. You're raising a brat with no correction and no guidance. Oh, but your house is spotless. But listen, it goes beyond being spotless. We're not trying to have nobody's going to walk into your household, ma'am, and say, congratulations, your house looks the best, and it's going on the front cover of next month's magazine. And most folks, when they come to your house, they don't even look. And you say, I can't have the missionaries over. Why? They live in third world countries. They're not going to look at your house and go, did you see there was dust on the AC return? Because that's not what they're looking for. Involve them in household chores and duties and even entertainment. We know a couple that it appears, from everything that we can tell, every time that they've gone on a date or vacation, it's just mom and dad, and they leave the kids. Man, we have had some of the best times. Just ask my boys about Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It's infamous with me. Though I did redeem myself the next year. And they were like, well, maybe. But they still talk about it. We have fun. I can tell you stories of growing up and doing certain things as a family that if you could ask my dad, we didn't know it growing up, but Daddy didn't have no money to go do something. At the time, camping was cheap, and so we went camping, and we'd spend a whole week because he just didn't have the money to go do big vacations. Like all the ones around him were flying out to Colorado and going skiing. And Dad says, we didn't do that. Now, I didn't know that. I didn't know it growing up. I had no clue. But man, we had some of the best memories. Just ask my sister Summer about that puppet with VBS. Include them. Make it quality time. And make sure that you reward appropriately. I think it's there's nothing wrong with working and making money, but you know that life is not just like if you just live here, we just give you money, like a welfare system. And some parents just give money because I don't know why. They just give money and make them earn it. You say, well, there's nothing to do. They're little. Give them a wet cloth and tell them to wipe the baseboards down and then pay them for it. something. And you know what? There's a sense of accomplishment. Assign responsibilities and teach them. And then what does it do? It instills character. You know what a child has a right to expect from you? They have a right to expect love, trust, and discipline. You know that little kid's class back there in the back right now? We've just made a shift and change. We fired a lady and put some new ones in there. No, we didn't. I'm always making changes, and I told Miss Sarah, I said, it's just some changes that need to be made, and here's how it's going to go, and here's the reasons why. And so she's back in here now, and there's 2 new ladies back there. But you know what that is? That's a structure for that age group. They just know on Wednesday night they have class. And these are the teachers, and this is the surrounding. And there's just something about that routine. Same room. Same story type of thing. It just, why? It's a discipline. It's a boundary. But it also means that every parent has a right to expect some things from the kids. A parent has a right to expect respect. Respect me as a parent. Second thing is obedience. Now, I know that transfers over to honor. And again, I know there's a lot of out of balance. I'm not trying to cover the 2 ditches on each side of the road. I'm just saying here, these 2 things are expected. If a parent says, I expect these. I expect you to have respect towards me. I will never refer to that man back there as Dale. No, ma'am, no, sir. That is my daddy. If I refer to him, it might be Brother Dale, out of respect. I remember a family member that we dealt with just recently, not within our immediate family, and the individual sitting there referring to his parents by their first name. And I thought within myself, no way. No. Did he do things wrong? Did she do things wrong? Sure. But I owed them respect. So I refer to them in Mama and Daddy. Look at Psalm 127. Psalm 127. Psalm 127. Psalm 127. Psalm 127, verse 3. Lo, that's like saying, look here it is. That's what it means. Children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. That's Bible thought. You've heard that one before. They're a blessing from God. That's what it should be. But go back to Proverbs 23 again. He said, he said his whole idea, if you withhold, if you don't give correction, you're going to wind up with a monster. That's what you're going to get. This is where, as a pastor, I don't always get to do this, but I so badly want to. But it would be disrespectful. I may get the opportunity one day. Some parent says, I just don't know what happened. And I want to go, ooh. I know the answer. Because you're an idiot raising them. Yeah, that's what I want to say. But I can't. I just go, well, God's a gracious God. Proverbs 23, look again at verse 24. The father of the righteous shall greatly rejoice. That's going to be a blessing one day. By God's grace and God's mercy, may my 4 sons do that which is right in life. And that'll be my greatest joy. Now, I don't have a necessary guarantee. I know this. Every one of your kids in this room and every one of my kids has got a bullseye on their hearts and their minds by the greatest enemy of God. And he wants your kids. And he'll do anything he can to destroy them. And he that begotteth a wise child shall have joy of him. Thy father and thy mother shall be glad, and she that bare thee shall rejoice. That'd be a great blessing. That'd be a great blessing. Look at verse 26. My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. What happens if you don't get their heart? What happens if you don't correct them? Well, 2 Timothy chapter 3, end time result. Doesn't matter what kid, girl, or boy it is, they'll become a lover of self. That's 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 to 5. That's the end time results. It will be a lover of self. What you really desire is, like Ruth chapter 1, that they learn to grab a hold of your God. In Ruth chapter 1, the illustration is Naomi has had her husband die, her 2 sons have died. She's left with 2 daughter-in-laws, and that's obviously Ruth and Orpah. And Orpah says, I'm going back to my people. And she stays and leaves. And she tells her, thank you. And Ruth says, no. She said, your God shall be my God, and your people shall be my people. And that illustration is the very thing when it comes to kids and grandkids. I so desire that my God becomes their God personally. And they learn to walk with Him and to talk with Him. Go to 1 Samuel chapter 3. 1 Samuel chapter 3. 1 Samuel chapter 3. Sadly, our society has got in its teaching, its philosophy, its legal laws. And it looks at them and it says, well, when you're 18, you can do what you want to. Well, wait, hold on. Oh, we don't, maybe not everything. We'll hold off a few things till you get to 21. And they give all these rules, but they just pump into them that what they need is just this liberty. And in 2 Peter, he said they promised them liberty, but they brought them into bondage. He's not talking about just kids. He's just talking about people. And that's what's happened to our society. It's happened to America. We've promised them liberty, and now they're in bondage to sin. And they don't know what to do with it. Here's something interesting in 1 Samuel chapter 3 and verse 13. This is a story of Eli. Now, Eli he's a fat guy. He's a priest. I don't know if you knew he was fat or not, but look at we're going to be at chapter 3, but look at chapter 4. In chapter 4 and verse 18, it says there that he was an old man and heavy. See that? He overweight. There's lots of problems with this, not just being overweight, but as the high priest, he's overweight, he's heavy. And in the passage of chapter 4, verse 18, he says he fell from off the seat backward. That's how he dies. You ever read that story? What seat? What seat? There's only one seat that is referenced to the tabernacle. And it's on the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat. We know that's not where he was sitting because he was near this entranceway here. This guy was a priest that was supposed to be working and laboring for God. Some point, some story, I don't know how he got there, somebody brings in a seat and he ain't doing his job. His character of this man, of Eli, is lazy, he's overweight, and he's not doing his job. That personality will get you in trouble. We'll just leave it right there. Go to chapter 3. In chapter 3, look at verse 13. For I have told him that I will judge his house. This is God speaking about Eli's house. His house forever for the iniquity, the sin, which he knoweth. He knows what he did. Because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. And therefore I have sworn unto the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice. In other words, there's no sacrifice he can make. It's already been done. Nor offering forever. In verse 13, he said, Eli, he said, I'm judging your house because you did not restrain your kids. Now, in this story, it is 2 boys, Hophni and Phinehas. And they got involved in immorality. And we're not really quite sure. There's some speculation of what they did. We get the gist of it. And God kills the 2 boys for it. But then he looks at Eli and he says, Eli, you didn't restrain them. Now, hold on a second. This guy's a priest. He's found a place to sit down. He's not doing his job. When you started off in chapter 3, verses 1 through 3, he said, ere the lamp of God has gone out. Remember, as you go inside of this tabernacle, there's a table of showbread, there's the altar of incense, and there's the candlestick. And the candlestick was to be kept going all the time. So we know this man is not doing his job. He's not pleasing the Lord. And yet he is raising Samuel of 1 and 2 Samuel. This is the next prophet to come. And God says, I'm going to judge you, Eli, because you have not taken care and you have not restrained your sons. Wait a minute. These 2 boys were priests. Priests couldn't serve until they got to be 20. Did you know a priest gets to retire when they're 50? I got 1 year. 1 more year, buddy. Just kidding. Yeah, so people say, well, retirement's not in the Bible. That priest got to retire at 50. So from 20 to 50, okay, so we're not talking about 13-year-old boys. We're talking between the age of 20 and the age of 50. And God says, Eli, you didn't restrain them. Now, just write this reference down because for the sake of time, just write the book of Genesis, chapter 8, verse 2. Chapter 8, 2. Genesis chapter 8, verse 2 is the first time the word restrain shows up. Has nothing to do with the priesthood. It says that God restrained the heavens with rain. Talking about Noah's flood. And in the same verse it says, and he stopped the heavens. So restrain means to stop. You know what is our biggest issue in raising children is sometimes getting past you. Not the kid. It's you. It's me. And some folks are just passive and they won't stop them. Well, it's just what he wants to do. No, stop him. He shouldn't be climbing up the scales of shelving in Walmart. Right? They don't stop them. They won't restrain them. They just give them a device. And give them whatever they want to. Stick another movie in because it just babysits them. There's no restraining. You know all that leads to? It leads to a stressful house and frustration. So we give them no responsibility. It just leads to laziness and slothfulness. Now, I don't know the age of these two boys, but I do see that God looks at Eli and says, you did not restrain them. You did not stop them from doing what they did wickedly at the temple, or the tabernacle right there. You didn't even say a word. And God says, I'm going to judge you for that. So how far does it go to say stop and here's how it works? You're going to have to navigate through that and figure it out. But I know this, he gets over to that pastor's house and he says, if he can't rule his own household, he's not fit for the house of God. And so I see that there's an idea that a household, a mom and a dad, they should be able to say, no, you're not doing that here. But listen, but if you wait till they're 25 and they're 30 and they're 49, all you're going to be doing is pulling the weed. At the same time you yank out that plant. Look at one last passage. I've got just a couple of minutes. Look at Isaiah chapter 7. Isaiah 7. It's a real famous passage, Isaiah chapter 7. Isaiah chapter 7. Look at verse 14. Isaiah 7:14. Therefore, the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. You remember that verse? Isaiah 7:14? That's Jesus, isn't it? It's actually fulfilled in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, verse 23, and obviously Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we present to us, and we stick it on every Christmas card, right? Isaiah 7:14. It's a famous verse. Okay, so verse 14 is about Jesus Christ being born into this world. Look at verse 15. Butter and honey shall he, that's Emmanuel, that's Jesus, shall he eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. That's a really weird verse. So he just told you that Jesus is going to eat two things. He's going to eat butter and honey. Now, I don't look at that and go, oh, so if you eat butter and honey, you'll be real smart and know how to turn away bad things. Now, that can't be the case. I mean, people eat butter and still dumb as rocks. So that doesn't mean. So what does he mean? Here's the simplicity of it. It's really deep. You ready? Okay. Butter and honey was fed to Jesus by Mary and Joseph. That's deep, wasn't it? You see why? I don't know. Maybe to fulfill prophecy. I don't know. Well, I think my guess is that everybody could get a hold of honey, and butter didn't cost too much. I'm not sure that he's really talking about that's what you got to have to give to kids. I think he's just showing you, here's God comes out of heaven, and he's born of a virgin, and Mary and Joseph, his earthly parents, fed him butter and honey. You know what he liked even when he came back after the resurrection? He had some broiled fish and honeycomb. You remember that? I just wonder if he just ended up liking it. You ready? Here we go. Grandparent, let's start with you. If every time they come to your house and you're always watching golf, guess what they're going to want to do one day? Play golf. If you're the one that taught them how to enjoy crawfish and suck in the heads, you're cultivating something. You are. There's everybody in this room that can remember whether it was grandfather, grandmother, you went to their house and they always served. They always talked about this. It's not just parents. It's family units. You say, well, they just don't like broccoli. Well, maybe that's because some of you are too picky. I'm not a big fan of sucking the heads of crawfish. My wife doesn't like seafood. So when missionaries come to town, I go find seafood. You know we don't really cultivate at our house a lot? Eating seafood. I'm not saying bad or wrong, doesn't matter. I'm just saying what you put. You said, man, I love baseball. You spend all your time at the baseball field? Guess what they're going to like more than church? Baseball. Let me backtrack just a bit. I don't know how this happened. Oh, I know. Can I guess? Because you cultivated it. You cultivated it. He said, preacher, I ain't got no kids. I'm going to get to it on Sunday. Because on Sunday he looks at he looks at a woman that has no children, and he says, I made her a joyful mother of children. How? She has no kids. I'm going to give you a little heads up. When God gives a piece of property, He expects it to be fruitful. We're the ones that decided not to do anything with it. Now, what I mean by that is that when He gives the desires within a woman or a man, even if we don't have the exact fulfillment of what we thought it should be, God didn't save you to leave you in a ditch. God didn't save you and say, okay, well, my child doesn't have children, so I have no grandchildren. Well, then borrow some. Borrow them. And I'm not being sacrilegious here. I'm being serious. You can find somebody to cultivate and to grow them spiritually. What is it that we're growing? What is it that we're taking that plant and we want to produce something? You say, well, I only get my grandkids once a year for 2 days or a week. Well, make the best of it. And don't sit on the seat. And don't get too heavy. And don't neglect the things of God. Somebody looked at a young Samuel and invested into him something that would become one of the greatest prophets of all of Israel. Well, it sure wasn't Eli. And it sure wasn't Hophni and Phinehas. And his mama only had him till she weaned him. But I know this about her. She had a relationship that she could talk to God and get her prayers answered. So that means she only had a space of a couple of years. And she made the best of that time she had. You know what we are? We're lazy and we're wasters of the blessings that God's given us. So go ahead and suck the heads of crawfish and watch the next ball game and watch all those movies and be busy with all the activities and make the boat and make the fishing the greatest thing of life. You say, wait a minute, you just told me to cultivate some entertainment. Yeah, I did say that, but you better make the priority that which is spiritual, because that world right there will rob them of everything that you try to invest in them that is for God. So, you better correct them. Because when they get old, you might lose their heart. And it'd be a lot harder to look back and say, hey, you're going the wrong way. Train up a child in the way he, not you, way he should go. You better get to know that child. You better get to know that grandchild. You better adopt one. And you say, I don't have any. We'll have a meeting right outside in that foyer. And then we will all line up, and you can have them for as long as you want. And teach them about Jesus. Because if you don't have a walk with God, you ain't got much to teach them. You better get to know Him. So, there's more thoughts from Proverbs 23. Some of you are like, I'm glad we're going to chapter 24 next. All right. Let's all stand and we'll close in a word of prayer. Brother Danny, will you pray for us this evening? We'll be dismissed.